Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry Saravia, the movies. Now, I have been talking about reboots and remakes for the last few years now on this particular channel, and with each year we're seeing an increasing number of remakes and reboots, most of which, by the way, are not asked for by the general public. Nobody is petitioning for these movies as far as I know. Certainly there's no need for most of them. So anyway, rather than reiterating the obvious and the fact that of course we're going to have now a TV movie remake of Rocky Horror Picture Show for one, not to mention The Exorcist, the TV series. I don't know how that's going to work. Can't say I'm really that delighted to know or want to know how it's going to work. Not to mention Uncle Buck, a TV series as well. Anyway, so let's discuss Poltergeist. Now, again, it doesn't make sense for me to talk about these things unless, of course, I actually see one of them. And remakes is not something I see very often, but Poltergeist is a movie much beloved to me. Because, you know, I mean, when I saw that in 1982 in theaters, it was scary as hell, and it still works today. It holds up nicely as an effective fright flick, and a nice blend of humor and pathos, in particular with the Freeling family, as we all remember from that movie. Craig T. Nelson, Jo Beth Williams, the parents, Heather O'Rourke, who unfortunately passed on as the little girl, Carol Ann, Dominique Dunn, who unfortunately also passed on. She was murdered. Anyway, this was really such a very full-bodied family. Living in suburbia, the father is a real estate agent and lives in one of the very houses that, of course, he's trying to sell. So it had that feel to a family that you cared about. You know, you were sympathetic to, and so on. So, but it held its own distinction as that, and it was sort of a roller coaster ride of laughs and chills and thrills and many scares and a few special effects, but it really worked as what it was, which was an effective haunted house story. And again, it had the pathos. It really made you care about this family, and it wasn't out to just shock you, although there were a couple of shocking moments in the film. So that's Poltergeist, 1982. So we're not reviewing that. We're reviewing now the remake of Poltergeist, which was seemed to be an on-again, off-again type project. Sam Raimi was involved, and boy, should he have known better. But then again, he didn't know any better when he remade Evil Dead, a movie which we could have probably done away with. And I do mean the remake, not the originals, although I like what they did on Showtime with bringing back Evil Dead with Bruce Campbell. So, I don't even know exactly where to start, except that Sam Rockwell and Rosemary DeWitt, they play the Bowens this time. They move into a house which is being foreclosed. He's out of work, and she is a somewhat on-again, off-again type of writer. Bestseller, it's not clear if she's the one, she's the breadwinner or what. But it seems like they're both unemployed, and they're able to buy a foreclosed home. Right there is a problem, but that wouldn't matter in terms of logic, because I don't think people really sell real estate agents foreclosed homes to people who are unemployed, but unless they've won the lottery or something. Or have some sort of nice nest egg. Anyway, the father was laid off, and they have their kids. The oldest teenage girl is obsessed with her cell phone. Then there's the youngest daughter, who of course is supposed to be like Carol Ann. And then there's the son, who seems very paranoid about everything and scared about every little thing and needs to always sleep with the parents and so on and so forth. So they move into this house, and it's a very sparsely populated neighborhood. There's hardly anybody around. So right there you're throwing off really what made the original work, was that sense of community, and that's completely lost in this movie. So anyway, but leaving that aside, something's wrong with this house. It is haunted, clearly. And they encounter a few things rather early on that remind everyone in the audience that this house is haunted. So those little creaks and that tree, it's making some weird noises, and it smashes through the window and carries the kid out of there. There's a problem right there. Definitely haunted house. So a reality show star is played by Jared Harris, and he's come in to sort of check the house and sort of cleanse the house and see what's going on. And he somehow, out of thin air, discovers that the house was built on, and all the houses, on a cemetery. But the difference is, as revealed also in the 1982 film, and a lot more chillingly, I might add, that the tombstones were removed, but not the bodies. So all the corpses are still buried underneath, underground rather. So now, the only real slight whiff of inspiration in this movie is that Sam Rockwell, the dad, he buys a drone, which is roughly the shape of a computer, like this one here. And during the scene where the little girl is whisked through the closet and into some sort of otherworldly realm where the ghosts live, you can sort of pass through there with a rope, just like in the original movie. And the father in the original film is able to grab Carol Ann, and then he falls through the roof downstairs and so on. So that's kind of like that's the portal. So in this movie, the drone, they decide that the way to locate the girl is to have the drone pass through that portal and find the girl. And at first it's a little bit eerie and rather disturbing, because you see all the ghosts and everything, but it takes away what was left to the imagination from the original film. And that's the only really good thing, because in this movie, Poltergeist, there is nothing new here. I mean, it's almost like it could have been called anything else. It has very little relation to the original film at all, except for the fact about the cemetery and bringing in people, these spook investigators, ghost travelers, ghost hunters, whatever you want to call them, who are in there to kind of record all of the spirits and their sounds, and etc. But we've seen this so many times, especially since Poltergeist, and of course we have reality shows that deal with this phenomenon. Why couldn't they have just done something else? See, The Conjuring was an original type of haunted house movie based on actual demonologists from the 1970s. So even though it's not completely original, it had some measure of inspiration and personality. This movie, even with these actors who are really good, Sam Rockwell and Rosemary DeWitt, they're not given enough to do, so you could have hired anybody else except those two actors. And if you're going to hire those two actors, give them something to do. Craig T. Nelson and Jo Beth Williams had a lot to work with in the original film. In this movie, it's almost like an episode of Fixer Upper, to a certain extent, except that the only real inspiration, again, is that Jared Harris is a reality show star. And what I mean by Fixer Upper is, you know, there are ugly clown dolls in the closet from the previous owners, and the plasma TV goes wild, and there's static, and, you know, the house seems like it's, you know, come alive, but there are issues, there are things that need to be fixed. It just didn't even seem really like a haunted house movie. In a strange way, it's just virtually anonymous. And again, I ask, why was this movie remade? Why did they do this again? Why are you calling it Poltergeist? Why tread on something that works so well in the original? And why on earth, and I haven't seen it this way because I've only seen it on cable, was this converted to 3D? I mean, what is the point? You know, 3D in particular, and I'm going off topic a little bit here, 3D has no real place anymore in cinema, I'm sorry to say. I mean, unless you really find an original way of working with it, there's some movies that are so well made in the past that don't need 3D, that feel very three-dimensional. And 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick, for example, feels very three-dimensional. Star Wars, especially, feels very three-dimensional. You don't need 3D to enhance something that can, you know, kind of take you out of your own dimension. So it's a serviceable movie. You know, it sort of gets the job done, but it's like a TV movie that somehow made it to theaters. There's nothing special about this Poltergeist movie. Why did they do this? For the money. But why? You know, and Poltergeist, I mean, the only other good thing I can say about this movie is that it's certainly better than the last two sequels to Poltergeist, which were terrible films. Why did they do this? You know, what is the point of remaking movies except for the brand name and to make money? I mean, that's the only real reason, so it's a dumb question to ask. But again, I ask, in terms of, you know, for the future of cinema, people are going to remember, hopefully, the 1982 film of Poltergeist. You know, you see that movie, and right away, I'm sure most people will look at it and say, there's no need for improvement. You know, I'm not going to say Poltergeist is a perfect film, but it is stunningly good. And to me, it's almost like if you're taking Ridley Scott's Alien or Aliens by James Cameron or Avatar or whatever, certain films that you think would work just fine as they are. The Terminator. Okay, there have been sequels. Nobody, as of yet, has remade the original The Terminator. Although I hate to say it, I have a feeling that's just going to happen one of these days. Because if you can remake Poltergeist and Fame and Footloose and Endless Love and About Last Night, granted that's based on a play by David Mamet, but still, and I mean the list goes on here, people. You know, it's one thing when you take School of Rock, you know, and turn it into a Broadway musical. Spider-Man, they did the same thing. But this is ridiculous. I mean, remaking just certain films that have no business being remade. You know, nobody's remade Gone with the Wind. They have remade It's a Wonderful Life, but not Gone with the Wind. You know, there are just some things that are kept off limits, but I hate to say it, I think it's just going to happen. But again, I ask, aside from money, and with Sam Raimi involved, what were they thinking? Why did they do this? It's just an anonymous, serviceable, mediocre movie, and there's so many better ones than this, that you're just treading on something that really meant something. It meant something. Poltergeist, the original, really meant something at one time. It kind of, it pulled at your heartstrings a little bit. There's some real emotional moments. It had a family you care about. This family, I didn't really feel like I was connected to them. Because the horrors, they set in maybe a little too soon in the movie. That's another problem with some horror movies. You have to let things settle slowly, but nobody knows those things anymore. And this is almost just barely an hour and a half long film, so right there is the problem. You know, haunted house movie, you have to let things, you need a few beats. You have to identify with the characters a little bit. You have to get to know the house a little bit too. I mean, this house, just I didn't even fully was engaged with the architecture of this house, or where one room was versus the other. It just looked like any other house. Whereas in the original film, and here's the thing too, what the original Poltergeist did so well was giving you moments where it creeped you out because of how they were shot, those moments. And I'll mention one thing that this movie can't even come close to what was accomplished in one particular scene on Poltergeist, and that was when JoBeth Williams is sitting with Carol Ann, and it's all done in one take, and they're in the kitchen, and JoBeth Williams goes to retrieve something, and she comes back. Carol Ann is sitting at the table, and suddenly all these chairs are kind of lined up on top of each other. You know, and it was done all in one take. And the way I understand it is they had crew persons on the side there, so when the camera, you know, pans to JoBeth Williams, they kind of arranged all this real fast. I mean, it's an amazing sight. Something that was mimicked a little bit in The Sixth Sense by M. Night Shyamalan. Similar moment where the mother is with her kid, Haley Joel Osment, and she goes to the laundry room, all done in one take. She comes back, and every single drawer and cupboard door is open. And I mean, it's all in one take, so it's rather, you know, amazing stuff. That's what this movie lacked. Something tangible and some sense of identification with the characters. This movie just kind of wastes away whatever made the original film work. If you want to see a mediocre haunted house movie and you want to escape from the world for an hour and a half, I suppose you could do worse, but you can do so much better. So, and this is Jerry Saravia at the Movies, signing off.